I still remember the exact moment I realized my family had planned it all. The resort receptionist's pitying glance as she slid the room key across the polished marble counter. "Just one key, Ms. Bennett? Your parents mentioned there would be 4 of you in the suite." Her words hung in the air between us as I stood there, my weekend bag slung over my shoulder, completely alone in the grand lobby of the Lake Tahoe resort. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice barely audible over the crackling fireplace. "Did you say my parents have already checked in?" She nodded, tapping at her computer. "Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett arrived yesterday evening with your sister's family. They said you'd be joining them today." Yesterday evening. The words echoed in my head as I gripped the counter to steady myself. My parents had told me our annual family gathering started today, Friday. They'd been insistent about it when I requested time off work, rearranged childcare for Nathan and Zoe, and drove 5 hours through mountain passes to get here. But they'd arrived yesterday, with my sister Amber and her children, without telling me. My name is Jordan Bennett. I'm 34, divorced, with 2 amazing kids, Nathan who's 8 and Zoe who's 6. I run the content department at a digital marketing agency in Portland, juggling deadlines and school pickups and trying to make it all look effortless. My ex, Megan, moved to Seattle 2 years ago for a tech job, leaving me with primary custody and a mountain of responsibilities I never expected to face alone. But that afternoon in Tahoe wasn't about my divorce or my job. It was about something far more fundamental: my place in my own family. I took the key with numb fingers and walked toward the elevators, my mind racing. This wasn't the first time my parents had shown preference for Amber and her family, but it was perhaps the most blatant. For years, I'd made excuses for them. Amber's a single mom. Amber struggles financially. Amber needs more support. But this felt deliberate, calculated. The suite was empty when I entered, the beds already claimed with scattered belongings, my parents in the master, Amber and her kids in the second bedroom. My luggage looked pathetic as I set it beside the pull-out couch in the living area, the couch that was clearly meant for me. I texted my parents. "Just arrived. Where is everyone?" The response came from my mother almost immediately. "Down at the lake with the kids. Join us when you're settled." I changed into casual clothes and made my way down to the shoreline. From a distance, I could see them, my father building a sandcastle with Amber's twins, my mother taking photos of Amber's oldest as he skipped stones across the water's surface. My sister lounged on a beach chair, sunglasses perched on her nose, scrolling through her phone. They looked like a perfect family, complete, without me. "There she is!" My father spotted me first, waving casually as if nothing was wrong. The workaholic finally made it. My mother adjusted her sun hat and smiled. "Jordan, darling, you missed the welcome dinner last night. The salmon was divine." I stood frozen in the sand, suddenly aware that this wasn't a miscommunication. This was intentional. "The welcome dinner? You told me the trip started today." Amber looked up from her phone with a dismissive wave. "Oh, Mom and Dad decided to come early. We thought it would be nice to have an extra day. I assumed they told you." "They didn't," I said, my voice tight. "They specifically told me Friday." My father slapped sand from his hands, his expression hardening in the way it always did when he was preparing to shut down a conversation. "Jordan, don't start making a scene. Does it really matter? You're here now." "It matters to me," I insisted, feeling my throat constrict. "Why would you tell me a different arrival day than everyone else?" My mother sighed dramatically, as if I was being unreasonable. "Jordan, with your work schedule and the kids, we just thought it would be easier for you to come on the official start date. Amber was able to be flexible." "Flexible?" I had to request this time off weeks ago. I had to arrange for Taylor to watch Nathan and Zoe. I could have come yesterday if you'd told me that's when everyone else was arriving. Amber rolled her eyes behind her sunglasses. It's not a big deal, Jor. You're always so intense about everything. That's when my nephew Jake looked up from his sandcastle and said it, the words that would change everything. Mommy said this is a test to see if Auntie Jordan really wants to be part of the family. The beach fell silent. Amber shot her son a warning look. My parents suddenly became very interested in adjusting their beach chairs. A test? I repeated, looking between them. What does that mean? My father cleared his throat. Jake, go. Play in the water with your siblings. Once the boy was out of earshot, he turned to me with a forced smile. Kids say the strangest things. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. No, I want to know what he meant. What kind of test is this? My mother glanced at Amber, then back to me. Jordan, you've been so distant since your divorce. Always too busy, always making excuses about work or the kids. We just wanted to see if you'd make the effort to be here, even if it wasn't perfectly convenient. So you deliberately gave me the wrong date? You started the family vacation without me as some sort of loyalty test? Amber snorted. See, this is exactly why we did it. You're overreacting, as usual. I'm overreacting? I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I'd experienced before. You deliberately excluded me from part of our family vacation, and I'm overreacting for being upset about it? My father stood up, towering over me as he had throughout my childhood, whenever I dared question him. Enough, Jordan. This attitude is exactly why we worry about you. Your sister makes time for family. Your sister prioritizes us. Your sister doesn't make everything so difficult. The words hit me like physical blows. All my life I'd heard variations of this theme. Amber is easier. Amber is more loving. Amber is more deserving. And suddenly, standing there with the afternoon sun beating down and my family staring at me like I was the problem, something inside me broke. Or perhaps, something finally clicked into place. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. This wasn't a test to see if I wanted to be part of the family. This was you showing me that I never truly was. My mother's expression softened into the patronizing look she always used when she thought I was being dramatic. Jordan, sweetie, of course you're part of the family. We just wish you acted like it more. I looked at them, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time. My father with his rigid expectations that I never seemed to meet. My mother with her conditional love that always felt just out of reach. My sister who had been positioned as the golden child for so long she believed it was her birthright. I'm going home, I announced, turning to leave. Jordan, my mother called after me. Don't be ridiculous. You just got here. I stopped and looked back at them. That's the point, isn't it? I just got here because you wanted it that way. You wanted me to feel like an outsider. Well, congratulations. Test completed. As I walked away, I heard my father's voice. Let her go. She'll calm down and come back. She always does. That was the moment I decided. Not this time. Back in the suite, I packed my things with trembling hands. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I'd spent too many years crying over my family's treatment, making excuses for their behavior, convincing myself that if I just tried harder, they would love me the way they loved Amber. I left a note on the coffee table. Heading home. Enjoy your vacation. Simple. Final. No emotional pleas, no angry accusations. Just the truth. The drive back to Portland was a blur of mountain roads and rest stops where I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had happened. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set, and a strange calm had settled over me. Taylor met me at the door, confusion written across her face. "Jordan, what are you doing back already?" My children raced into the entryway behind her, their excited voices bringing me back to reality. "Mommy, you're home early." I knelt down, gathering Nathan and Zoe into my arms, breathing in the scent of their shampoo and the innocent love they gave so freely. "I missed you too much," I told them, summoning a smile. "I decided I'd rather be here with you." Later, after they'd gone to bed, I sat with Taylor in my kitchen, a glass of wine untouched in front of me as I recounted the day's events. "They did what?" Taylor's eyes widened in disbelief. "They deliberately started the vacation without you as some kind of test?" I nodded, still numb. Apparently, I've never been family enough for them. Taylor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Jordan, I've known you since college. You've bent over backward for your family for years. You've rearranged your life, your schedule, your priorities, all to try to please them. And it's never enough," I whispered, the truth of it settling heavy in my chest. "Because it can't be," Taylor said gently. "This isn't about you not doing enough." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This is about them needing someone to be less than, so Amber can be more than. Her words struck me with their clarity. All these years, I'd been trying to earn what should have been freely given. I'd been fighting for a place at a table where there was never truly a seat for me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone lit up with a series of texts. From Mom. "Jordan, stop being childish and come back to the resort." From Dad. "Your behavior is embarrassing. Think about the example you're setting for your kids." From Amber. "Way to ruin the vacation, drama queen." I turned off my phone without responding. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to engage. I wasn't going to explain myself or defend my feelings or beg for understanding. I was done. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made pancakes with Nathan and Zoe, laughing as they drizzled too much syrup and created sticky masterpieces on their plates. We spent the day at the neighborhood park, then bought ice cream and watched movies until they fell asleep on the couch. It was simple. It was perfect. It was family. Real family, based on love that didn't come with conditions or tests. On Sunday evening, my phone began ringing again. My parents, alternating calls as if tag-teaming their approach. I let them go to voicemail, not yet ready to hear their voices. But on Monday morning, as I dropped the kids at school and headed to work, I finally listened to their messages, curious about what they would say after having time to reflect. My mother's voice, tight with controlled anger. "Jordan, this behavior is unacceptable. Your father and I expect better from you. Call us immediately." My father, stern and unyielding. "Jordan, enough is enough. You're disappointing the entire family with this stunt. Amber's kids were looking forward to spending time with their aunt." Not a single apology, not one acknowledgement that they had done anything wrong. Just blame and guilt, their weapons of choice whenever I stepped out of line. I deleted the messages and walked into my office with my head held high. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never, again, allow myself to be tested by people who claimed to love me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The real test, the one that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my family, was still to come. For the next 2 weeks, silence descended between me and my family, the kind of heavy, deliberate silence that speaks volumes. I went through the motions of daily life, client meetings at the agency, helping Nathan with his science project, braiding Zoe's hair before school, meal prepping on Sundays. But beneath the routine, something fundamental had shifted inside me. I kept expecting to feel guilty for walking away from the Tahoe trip. I kept waiting for that familiar ache to set in, the one that usually accompanied any confrontation with my family. That desperate need to make things right, to be forgiven, to be allowed back into their good graces. But it never came. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. "You seem different," Taylor observed one evening as we sat on my back deck, watching our kids play in the yard. Nathan and her son were building an elaborate fort with sticks and blankets, while Zoe directed the operation with all the authority a 6-year-old could muster. "Different how?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Lighter somehow. Like you set down something heavy you've been carrying for years." I sipped my iced tea, considering her words. "I think I did. I think I finally stopped trying to earn my place in my own family." Taylor nodded, her eyes on the children. "About time." My phone buzzed on the deck table between us. My mother's name flashed on the screen for the 3rd time that day. I ignored it, as I had every call since Tahoe. "Aren't you going to answer?" "That?" Taylor asked. "No." The simplicity of my response surprised even me. No justification, no explanation, no agonizing over what I should do. Just no. Taylor raised an eyebrow. "Wow. The old Jordan would have jumped to answer that." "The old Jordan is retired," I said with a small smile. "She worked too hard for too little return." That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in my home office reviewing the family group chat I'd muted days ago. The messages started. With annoyance, shifted to anger, then morphed into something more calculated. "Mom. Jordan, you're being ridiculous. Call me back." "Dad. This behavior reflects poorly on you. We raised you better." "Amber. Mom and Dad are upset. Way to ruin the vacation for everyone." "Mom. Your father isn't feeling well. Is this really how you want things to be if something happens to him?" "Dad. Jordan, there are family matters we need to discuss. This silent treatment is childish." "Amber. FYI. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof because of your drama." The manipulation was so transparent now that I could see it clearly. The guilt trips, the health scares, the accusations, all designed to pull me back into line. How had I never recognized this pattern before? I closed the chat without responding and opened my email instead. Work was busy, which was a blessing. I'd thrown myself into a new campaign for an eco-friendly clothing brand, channeling my energy into creativity rather than family drama. The client loved our initial concepts, and my team was excited about the direction. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my career, not constantly distracted by the latest family crisis or Amber's demands for attention. The next morning, as I was rushing the kids through breakfast and backpack checks, my doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence at 7:30 a.m. on a weekday. "I've got it," Nathan called, racing to the door before I could stop him. "Nathan, wait. Check who it is first." But he had already swung the door open. "Grandma." His excited voice carried through the house, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I rounded the corner to find my mother standing in my entryway, perfectly put together as always in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, her silver hair meticulously styled. She wore the serene, slightly martyred expression she always adopted when she felt she was being reasonable in an unreasonable situation. "Mom," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "This is a surprise." "Clearly," she replied, bending to hug Nathan, who was bouncing with excitement. "I wouldn't have had to surprise you if you'd answered your phone." Zoe appeared beside me, her small hand slipping into mine. Unlike her brother, who adored his grandparents unconditionally, Zoe had always been more reserved around them, as if sensing the undercurrents even at her young age. "Grandma's here," she stated quietly, neither excited nor upset, simply observing. "I see that, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand. "Why don't you and Nathan finish your breakfast? You still need to brush your teeth before school." Nathan looked between us, suddenly aware of the tension. But Grandma just got here. My mother seized the opportunity. I could take them to school this morning, Jordan. Give you a break. We could catch up afterward. It was a classic move, using the children as leverage, positioning herself as the generous one and me as the potential villain who would deny my kids time with their grandmother. That's not necessary, I said firmly. Today is a normal school day, and we have our routine. But Mommy, Nathan began. Nathan, I kept my voice gentle but firm. Go finish your breakfast, please. Grandma and I need to talk for a minute. Once the children were back in the kitchen, I turned to my mother. Why are you here, Mom? She sighed, adjusting her purse strap in the practiced way she did when preparing to deliver a rehearsed speech. Because this has gone on long enough, Jordan. You've made your point. Your father and I understand you were upset about the Tahoe arrangements, but disappearing and ignoring our calls for 2 weeks is excessive. Excessive, I repeated, tasting the word. Is that what you think this is about? Me being excessive? What would you call it? You abandoned our family vacation without a word, traumatized your sister and her children, and have been giving us the silent treatment ever since. Your father's blood pressure is not my responsibility, I finished, for her. And I didn't abandon anyone. I was the one who was deliberately excluded and then gaslighted when I called it out. My mother's eyes narrowed. Gaslighted? Where do you get these terms? From those self-help books you're always reading? Does it matter where I get my vocabulary, Mom? The point is, you and Dad and Amber set me up. You gave me the wrong date, on purpose to test my commitment to the family. And when I had a reasonable emotional reaction to that manipulation, you all attacked me for it. She waved a dismissive hand. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. It was a minor miscommunication. It wasn't a miscommunication. Amber's son literally told me it was a test. Those were his words, not mine. My mother had the grace to look momentarily discomfited, but she recovered quickly. Children exaggerate, Jordan. You know that. Do they? Or do they sometimes speak the unfiltered truth that adults try to hide? We stood in silence for a moment, at an impasse that felt both new and decades old. Look, my mother finally said, softening her tone. I didn't come here to argue. I came because we need to talk about the lake house. I blinked, caught off guard by the abrupt change of subject. What about it? The lake house had been in our family for generations. A modest cabin on the Oregon coast that my grandfather had built and my father had inherited. We'd spent summers there throughout my childhood, and it held some of my few positive family memories. Your father and I are considering selling it. Selling it? Why? Dad always said he'd never part with it. She adjusted her watch, not meeting my eyes. Times change. We're getting older, and the upkeep is becoming too much. Besides, we could use the money for retirement. Something felt off about this explanation. My parents were comfortably well off. The lake house wouldn't make a significant difference to their retirement lifestyle. There's more to it, isn't there? I pressed. My mother's lips thinned. We need your signature since the property is in a family trust. That's why I'm here. And there it was. The real reason for her surprise visit. Not concern for our relationship, not worry about my well-being, but a practical need for my cooperation. I see. I felt oddly calm, as if watching the scene from a distance. When do you need this signature? She seemed relieved by my reasonable tone. As soon as possible. We have interested buyers, and the market is favorable right now. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks of silence after their test at Tahoe, but the moment they needed something from me, my mother appeared on my doorstep as if nothing had happened. I'll need to review the documents first, I said, and I'd like to speak with the family lawyer directly. Her expression clouded. That won't be necessary. It's a straightforward sale. Nevertheless, that's my condition. If you want my signature, I'll review everything properly before signing. Jordan, this attitude. Mom, I interrupted gently. I need to get my kids to school now. If you'd like to leave the paperwork, I'll look it over this weekend. The subtle shift in power wasn't lost on either of us. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, I was setting the terms, and my mother was the one who needed something from me. She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. The documents are in here. Your father expects to hear from you by Monday. I took the envelope without comment. I'll walk you out. I need to load the kids in the car. As I called Nathan and Zoe to get their backpacks, my mother made one last attempt. Your father and I thought maybe you could come to dinner this Sunday. Bring the kids. We could discuss the lake house and other things. What other things? She waved vaguely. Family matters. Things we should talk about in person. The old Jordan would have agreed immediately, eager for any chance at reconciliation. But as I stood in my own entryway, the weight of the manila envelope in my hands, I realized I was no longer that person. I can't this Sunday. The kids have activities and I have work to finish. Work on a Sunday? Her disapproval was palpable. Yes, work on a Sunday. That's how I support my children as a single mother. She flinched slightly at my directness. Well, call when you've reviewed the papers. After dropping the kids at school, I sat in my car in the parking lot, the manila envelope on the passenger seat beside me. Something about this situation felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on why. My parents had always been attached to the lake house. Selling it seemed out of character. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I called Mr. Winters, the family lawyer, directly. In the past, all legal matters went through my father. He was the one who communicated with Mr. Winters, who made decisions, who told the rest of us what had been decided. But I was done accepting filtered information. Bennett Legal Matters. Mr. Winters' office, his assistant answered. Hi, this is Jordan Bennett. I'd like to speak with Mr. Winters regarding the sale of the family lake house. There was a pause. One moment, please. A few minutes later, Mr. Winters himself came on the line. Jordan, this is unexpected. How can I help you? My mother just delivered paperwork for me to sign regarding the sale of the lake house. I wanted to discuss it directly with you. Another pause, longer this time. I'm afraid I'm not aware of any sale proceedings for the Bennett Lake property. My stomach tightened. You're not? My mother said there are interested buyers and that they need my signature as soon as possible. This is the first I'm hearing of it, he said, his professional tone tinged with confusion. The last documentation I filed regarding that property was the updated family trust last year, which named you and your sister as equal beneficiaries. So there's no pending sale? No paperwork that's been drawn up? Not through this office, no. And as your family's legal counsel for 30 years, I would expect to be involved in such a transaction. I thanked him and ended the call, staring at the manila envelope with new suspicion. What exactly was my mother trying to get me to sign? At the office, I locked my door and finally opened the envelope. Inside was not a real estate contract, but a document titled Amendment to Bennett Family Trust. As I scanned the dense legal text, my breath caught. This wasn't about selling the lake house. It was about removing me as a beneficiary and transferring my portion entirely to Amber. The manipulative brilliance of it was breathtaking. They had invented a story about selling the property because they knew I might agree to that, while hiding their true intention, writing me out of my inheritance. I spread the papers across my desk, reading every line carefully. The document was filled with legal jargon, but the essence was clear. I would be relinquishing all current and future claims to the lake house in recognition of financial support already provided. What financial support? I had never asked my parents for money In fact, since my divorce, I had made a point of being financially independent. Then it hit me. This wasn't about money I had received. This was about money they had given Amber. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. My sister's new car last year, the loan for her house down payment, the vacations, the private school, tuition for her kids. My parents had been financially supporting Amber for years, likely using assets that should have been divided equally between us. And now they wanted to make it official by having me sign away my inheritance. I leaned back in my chair, a strange calm washing over me. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was about deliberately disinheriting me in favor of my sister. The test at Tahoe suddenly made more sense. They had been laying groundwork, creating a narrative that I was distant, difficult, not really committed to the family. A narrative that would justify their decision to cut me out. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother said she dropped off the paperwork. When can we expect your signature?" I set the phone down without responding and turned instead to my computer. I spent the next hour researching trust law and beneficiary rights, making notes and highlighting sections of the document where questionable clauses appeared. By the time I left the office that evening, I had a plan. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. This was about protecting what rightfully belonged to my children, too. The lake house represented more than property. It was part of their heritage, their connection to family history that shouldn't be erased because of adult conflicts. As I picked up Nathan and Zoe from after-school care, watching their faces light up when they saw me, I felt a fierce protectiveness that I hadn't allowed myself to fully embrace before. For too long, I'd taught them by example that it was okay to accept less, to apologize for existing, to be grateful for scraps of affection. That ended now. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" Nathan asked hopefully as we drove home. "Sure," I agreed, smiling at his surprised delight in the rearview mirror. The old Jordan would have said no on a weeknight, worried about what my mother would think about such an indulgent parenting decision. The new Jordan realized how ridiculous that was. "With stuffed crust?" Zoe pressed, sensing an unusual opportunity. "Absolutely, with stuffed crust." At home, as we gathered around the kitchen island eating pizza and laughing over Nathan's dramatic retelling of a playground incident, my phone rang again. My father this time. I glanced at it and turned it face down without breaking the flow of conversation with my children. Later, after they were tucked in bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and the trust amendment spread before me. My father had left a voicemail, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Jordan, call me back. There may have been a misunderstanding about the paperwork your mother brought over." A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it now that they realized I had likely discovered their true intentions. Not a deliberate attempt to deceive. Me, not a calculated effort to manipulate me into signing away my children's inheritance. Just a misunderstanding. I picked up my phone and typed out a message to both my parents. "I've reviewed the documents thoroughly. I understand exactly what you're asking me to sign and why. I'll be consulting with my own attorney before taking any action. Please direct all future communication about this matter through legal channels." My finger hovered over the send button. This message would change everything. It would formalize the break that had begun at Tahoe, transforming a family disagreement into a legal dispute. There would be no going back to the way things were. Not that I wanted to return to that unhealthy dynamic anyway. I thought about all the times I had backed down, apologized when I wasn't wrong, accepted less than I deserved in the name of keeping peace. I thought about the lesson that taught my children. I thought about the lake house where Nathan had learned to swim and Zoe had collected shells, the place that connected them to a family history that was rightfully part of their story. I pressed send. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with incoming calls. First my mother, then my father, then my mother again. I silenced each one, a strange sense of power flowing through me with each declined call. I was done being manipulated, done being tested, done being found wanting. Setting my phone to Do Not Disturb, I turned my attention back to the trust documents, making notes for the attorney I planned to contact in the morning. Whatever happened next, I was prepared to fight, not just for myself, but for my children, and what was rightfully theirs. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and a flurry of text messages ranging from pleading to threatening. I scrolled through them as I made coffee, feeling oddly detached from the emotional manipulation that would have devastated me just weeks before. From Mom: "Jordan, you're blowing this out of proportion. We need to talk as a family." From Dad: "This is completely unnecessary. Lawyers will only complicate things." From Amber: "WTF, Jordan? Mom is in tears because of you. Again." I set my phone aside and focused on getting Nathan and Zoe ready for school, maintaining our normal routine, despite the chaos my parents were trying to create. As I helped Zoe tie her shoes, my phone rang again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Jordan? It's Lucas. Lucas Mitchell." I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Lucas had been a family friend for years, more my parents' generation than mine, but someone I had always respected. He was pragmatic, direct, and one of the few people my father actually listened to. "Lucas, hi. This is unexpected." "I know, and I apologize for the intrusion. Your father called me last night, quite agitated about some family dispute. He asked me to reach out to you, to serve as a mediator of sorts." I laughed despite myself. Of course he did. Rather than address the issue directly, he sends in reinforcements. "That does sound like Richard," Lucas agreed, his tone wry. "Look, I'm not taking sides here. I've known your family too long to get in the middle of Bennett drama, but I thought you might appreciate a friendly ear, someone a step removed from the situation." I hesitated. Lucas had always been fair, but he was still my father's friend. "I appreciate the offer, but this has moved beyond a simple family disagreement." So I gathered from Richard's version of events, which I suspect tells only part of the story. He paused. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee? Just to talk. No pressure. No agenda." Something in his voice, a note of genuine concern, made me reconsider. "When were you thinking?" "Today, if possible. I'm in Portland for business just until tomorrow." I checked my calendar. "I could do lunch. There's a cafe near my office called Riverside Bakery." "Noon?" "I'll be there," Lucas promised. "And Jordan? Whatever's happening, I'm glad you're standing your ground. It's been a long time coming." His parting words stayed with me as I dropped the kids at school and headed to the office. Had others seen what I was only now recognizing, that I had spent decades accepting unfair treatment from my family? By noon, I had called 3 attorneys specializing in trust law and scheduled a consultation with one for the following day. I felt prepared as I walked into Riverside Bakery, spotting Lucas immediately at a corner table. He stood as I approached, greeting me with the same warm smile I remembered from family gatherings years ago. "Jordan, you look well," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Motherhood suits you." "Thanks, Lucas. It's good to see you." We ordered sandwiches and coffee, making small talk about his business travels and my children until our food arrived. Finally, Lucas leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "So, your father tells me you're threatening legal action over the lake house." I set down my coffee. "That's one interpretation. Another would be that I'm protecting my legal rights after discovering my parents attempted to trick me into signing away my inheritance." Lucas's eyebrows shot up. "That's significantly different from Richard's version of events." "I'm not surprised. What exactly did he tell you?" "That there was a misunderstanding about some routine trust paperwork and that you're making it into something it's not." I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the document, sliding it across the table. See for yourself. This is what they wanted me to sign. Lucas adjusted his glasses and scanned the pages, his expression growing more troubled as he read. This is not at all what Richard described. No, I imagine it wasn't. He looked up at me, genuine confusion in his eyes. Why would they do this? Richard has always been so proud of that lake house, of keeping it in the family. In the family, yes, just not my branch of it. I explained everything. The years of favoritism, the Tahoe test, the surprise visit from my mother under false pretenses. Lucas listened intently, his lunch forgotten. When I finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I've known your parents for 30 years, and while Richard can be traditional in his views, I never would have expected this level of manipulation. Neither did I admitted. At least I didn't want to see it. He gestured to the document. Have you shown this to an attorney yet? I have a consultation tomorrow. Good. Because this, he tapped the paper, is legally questionable at best. The language here about financial support already provided creates a false equivalency between legitimate inheritance rights and discretionary gifts they may have given Amber. No reputable lawyer would have drafted this. His validation of my concerns lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. That's what I thought, but I wondered if I was overreacting. You're not, Lucas assured me. If anything, your response has been remarkably measured given the circumstances. We finished our lunch, the conversation shifting to more practical matters. What to expect from the legal consultation, how to handle communication with my parents. In the meantime, strategies for protecting my children from the family tension. As we were preparing to leave, Lucas hesitated. Jordan, I've been friends with your father since college. I've watched you grow up, get married, have children of your own. And I've also seen how differently he treats you and Amber. I swallowed hard, surprised by his directness. What I've never understood, he continued, is why Richard doesn't see what's right in front of him. That you're the one who embodies the values he claims to cherish. Hard work, self-sufficiency, integrity. He shook his head. For what it's worth, I think he's making the biggest mistake of his life, pushing you away like this. Thank you, I managed, unexpectedly moved by his words. One more thing. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to me. This is the name of an excellent trust attorney. If you don't like the one you're meeting tomorrow, give her a call. She helped my daughter navigate a similar situation with her stepfather's estate. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Lucas surprised me with a brief hug. Stand your ground, Jordan. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when they're with family. Walking back to my office, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and resolve. The conversation with Lucas had confirmed what I already knew. There was no going back. The relationship I had with my parents and sister was irreparably damaged, not just by the latest betrayal, but by decades of similar treatment. But for the first time, I was facing that reality without guilt or self-doubt. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Lucas says he spoke with you. I hope he helped you see reason. Your mother and I are waiting for your call. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. Lucas had indeed helped me see, just not in the way my father had hoped. That evening, as I helped Nathan with homework and listened to Zoe practice reading aloud, I realized something important. Breaking free from my family's toxic patterns wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about creating a healthier model for my children, showing them that love shouldn't require constant tests, that they were inherently worthy of respect, that their boundaries mattered. Whatever happened next with the lake house, with the trust, with my parents and Amber, I had already won the most important battle. I had finally recognized my own worth, and nothing could take that away from me again. The morning after meeting Lucas, I sat in attorney Catherine Reyes's office, watching as she methodically reviewed the trust amendment my parents had tried to get me to sign. Her office was exactly what I'd expected from the moment I'd called. Her, professional, understated, with degrees and family photos arranged tastefully on the walls. The kind of place that radiated competence without needing to announce it. "Well," she said finally, setting down the document and removing her reading glasses, "this is quite something." "That's one way to put it," I replied, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Despite my newfound resolve, being here still felt surreal, like something that happened to other families, not mine. "Let me be direct, Ms. Bennett. This amendment appears designed to circumvent normal inheritance procedures by reframing your sister's gifts as advances against your share of the trust. Had you signed this, particularly without proper legal review, you would have effectively signed away not only your claim to the lake house, but potentially other shared family assets as well." I nodded, the confirmation both validating and painful. That's what I suspected. What's particularly concerning is the deliberate misrepresentation. Your mother told you this was about selling the property, but the document has nothing to do with a sale. That suggests intentional deception, not a misunderstanding. Attorney Reyes leaned forward slightly, her gaze direct but compassionate. "Ms. Bennett, may I ask what your goal is here? What outcome would you like to see?" The question caught me off guard. In the whirlwind of discovery and betrayal, I hadn't fully articulated to myself what I wanted beyond not signing the fraudulent document. I began, then paused to gather my thoughts. "I want to protect what rightfully belongs to my children. The lake house has been in our family for generations. My kids have memories there. They deserve their share of that inheritance. And beyond the material assets, what do you want from your relationship with your parents and sister?" I took a deep breath. Honestly, I don't know anymore. For most of my life, I've wanted their approval, their equal treatment, their genuine love. But after this, I gestured toward the document. "I'm not sure that's possible." Attorney Reyes nodded, making a note in her legal pad. "Sometimes these situations force us to distinguish between what we've always wanted and what's actually possible. It's painful, but it can also be clarifying." "That's exactly it," I said, relieved to be understood. I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn something they seem fundamentally unwilling to give. At some point, I have to accept that and focus on protecting myself and my children. "That's a healthy perspective," she affirmed. "Now let's talk strategy." For the next hour, we discussed options. Ms. Reyes laid out potential approaches, from firmly declining to sign with no further engagement, to negotiating new trust terms, to pursuing legal action for attempted fraud. Each path had advantages and drawbacks, and by the time our meeting concluded, I had a clearer sense of my position and rights. "I'll draft a formal response letter," she said as we wrapped up. "It will assert your rights as a beneficiary, reject the proposed amendment, and establish that all future communication about the trust should be directed to my office. How does that sound?" "Perfect," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since Tahoe, I wasn't facing my family's manipulation alone. As I left the office and walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a notification. My sister had posted in our family group chat, the one I'd been ignoring for days. "Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary dinner this weekend. Everyone's attendance is mandatory. Yes, that means you, Jordan. No more drama. This is about Mom and Dad, not your issues." The old Jordan would have felt guilty. The old Jordan would have cleared her schedule, arranged childcare, bought a gift, and shown up with an apologetic smile, ready to pretend everything was fine for the sake of family harmony. The new Jordan took a screenshot of the message and emailed it to Catherine Reyes with a brief note. FYI, latest attempt at contact. Please advise. Then I muted the group chat again and drove to my office. I had barely settled at my desk when my phone rang, Amber's number flashing on the Yakshi screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, setting it to speaker while I continued organizing files for an afternoon client meeting. So you'll answer for me, but not Mom and Dad? Her voice was sharp, accusatory. Hello to you too, Amber. Cut the pleasantries. Did you see my message about the anniversary dinner? I continued sorting papers, my voice deliberately calm. I saw it. And, are you coming or continuing your childish tantrum? I'm not having this conversation with you. Amber. She made a sound of exasperation. Seriously, Jordan? It's their 40th anniversary, 40 years of marriage. Do you have any idea how selfish you look right now? I set down my pen and gave the phone my full attention. Selfish? That's an interesting choice of words from someone who just tried to help our parents trick me out of my inheritance. A pause, then with forced confusion. What are you talking about? The trust amendment, Amber. The one Mom tried to get me to sign under false pretenses, claiming they were selling the lake house when actually they were transferring my share to you. Another pause. Longer this. Time. When she spoke again, her voice had less conviction. You're twisting things. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I've had an attorney review the document. An attorney? She sounded genuinely shocked. You got a lawyer involved? In a family matter? God, Jordan, that's so extreme. I almost laughed at the absurdity. What's extreme is attempting to defraud your sister, then calling her selfish for protecting herself. Nobody was defrauding anyone, Amber insisted, but her voice had lost its edge. It was just balancing things. Mom and Dad have helped me financially over the years, and this was a way to make things fair. Fair? I repeated, genuine anger rising in my throat. There's nothing fair about secretly planning to disinherit me, then manufacturing a fake crisis to trick me into signing away my rights. It wasn't like that, she said again, but weakly. It was exactly like that. And you know what the saddest part is, Amber? Not once, not one single time, in all the years they've been helping you financially, did I ever complain or feel entitled to the same. I've supported myself and my children without asking for anything. Yet somehow I'm still the selfish one, for refusing to be manipulated and lied to. Silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken resentments and uneven treatment. The anniversary dinner is at 7 on Saturday, Amber finally said, her voice subdued. At Westlake Grill, private room in the back. I won't be there. Jordan? No, Amber. I won't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I won't smile and celebrate while knowing what you all tried to do. Send them my congratulations, but I won't be attending. I ended the call before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone down. Standing up to my parents was one thing. Confronting Amber directly was another level entirely. For so long, I had accepted her position as the favored daughter, never challenging the dynamic for fear of seeming jealous or petty. But something had fundamentally changed inside me. I was done accepting scraps of respect, done making excuses for their behavior, done pretending that their treatment was anything other than deeply unfair and hurtful. My desk phone rang, my assistant Emily. Jordan, your father is on line 1. He says it's urgent. I closed my eyes briefly. Tell him I'm in a meeting and will need to call back later. He's quite insistent. Emily, I said gently, I'm not available to speak with him right now. If he says it's an emergency involving someone's health or safety, I'll take the call. Otherwise, please tell him I'll contact him when I have time. Yes, of course, she replied, surprise evident in her voice. I had never before refused a call from my father, no matter how inconvenient the timing. As I resumed preparing for my meeting, my email pinged with a response from Catherine Reyes. Ms. Bennett, thank you for forwarding this message. Please continue to document all contact attempts. Regarding the anniversary dinner, you are under no obligation to attend, legally or ethically. Family events are often used as pressure points during disputes like this, creating public situations where you might be cornered into discussions better handled through proper channels. My formal response letter to your parents will be ready for your review by tomorrow morning. Once approved, I suggest we send it by certified mail to establish a clear record. Regards, Catherine Reyes, Esquector. Her email strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about being difficult or holding a grudge. It was about establishing healthy boundaries after a serious breach of trust. The remainder of my workday passed in a blur of client meetings and campaign discussions. I appreciated the distraction, the chance to focus on creative problems instead of family drama. By the time I picked up the kids from after-school care, I had almost managed to push thoughts of the anniversary dinner from my mind. Almost. Mommy, can we have ice cream after dinner? Zoe asked as we drove home, her voice hopeful. Not tonight, sweetie. It's a school night. But Grandma always gives us ice cream when we go to her house, Nathan chimed in from the back seat. Even on school nights, Zoe added, sensing an opportunity. The mention of my mother sent a fresh wave of sadness through me. Despite everything, my children loved their grandparents. They didn't understand why we hadn't seen them recently, and I had been vague in my explanations, not wanting to burden them with adult conflicts. I know Grandma does things differently, I said carefully. But in our house, we save ice cream for weekends and special occasions. When are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa again? Nathan asked, his innocence making the question all the more difficult. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I'm not sure, buddy. Grandma and Grandpa are busy right now. Is it because you're mad at them? Zoe asked quietly. At 6, she was uncannily perceptive about emotional undercurrents. I met her eyes in the rearview mirror, debating how much to share. What makes you think I'm mad at them? She shrugged. You get a funny face when they call, and you don't answer the phone anymore. Out of the mouths of babes. I pulled into our driveway and turned in my seat to face both children. Mommy. And Grandma and Grandpa are having a disagreement right now. Sometimes adults need space to work things out. Like a timeout? Nathan asked. I smiled despite myself. Kind of like that, yes. Are they in trouble for being mean? Zoe pressed, still watching me intently. The question hit uncomfortably close to home. It's complicated, sweetie, but you don't need to worry about it. I promise. As we entered the house and began our evening routine, backpacks unpacked, hands washed, homework started, I wondered how much my children had observed over the years. Had they noticed the difference in how their grandparents treated them compared to Amber's kids? Had they sensed the underlying tension during family gatherings? Children absorbed so much more than adults often realized. After dinner, while the kids were taking baths, I checked my email and found a message from my mother. Jordan, Amber tells me you're refusing to attend our anniversary dinner. I can't begin to express how hurtful this is. 40 years of marriage is a significant milestone, and your absence would be noted by everyone. Whatever issues you think you have with us, surely you can set them aside for one evening to honor your father and me. We raised you better than this, Jordan. Family comes first. Always. Your father is particularly upset, though he won't admit it. His blood pressure has been concerning since this whole lake house misunderstanding began. Please reconsider, for the sake of family peace, if nothing else. Mom. The calculated nature of her appeal was so transparent now that I could see the pattern, the guilt trip about the milestone event. The veiled criticism of my character, "We raised you better." The health concern used as leverage. The framing of their attempted deception as a misunderstanding. The appeal to family peace, which had always meant me accommodating whatever they wanted. I started to type a response, then stopped myself. No, this was exactly why I had hired Catherine Reyes. I forwarded the email to her instead, adding a brief note. Another attempt at contact, this time more directly manipulative. "I'm not responding." While waiting for the kids to finish their baths, I scrolled through my contacts and called Taylor. She answered on the second ring, the sounds of her own children playing Audible in the background. "Hey, what's up?" she asked. "My parents' 40th anniversary dinner is this Saturday. I'm not going, and I need someone to tell me I'm not a terrible person for skipping it." Taylor didn't hesitate. "You're not a terrible person. After what they tried to pull with that trust document, they're lucky you're still speaking to them at all." Her immediate support loosened the knot in my chest. "Thanks. I know you're right, but a lifetime of conditioning is hard to break," she finished for me. "I get it. Want me to come over after the kids are in bed? We could open a bottle of wine and talk it through." "I'd love that, but I have a ton of work to finish tonight," I said regretfully. "Rain check? Absolutely. And Jordan, stay strong. You're doing the right thing." After getting the kids to bed, I settled at my kitchen table with my laptop, alternating between work projects and research on family trusts. Around 11, just as I was preparing to turn in, my phone buzzed with an unexpected text from Lucas Mitchell. "Jordan, hope I'm not texting too late. Wanted to give you a heads up that Richard called me again today, very agitated about your refusal to attend the anniversary dinner. He asked me to talk some sense into you. I declined, but thought you should know they're still trying to apply pressure through multiple channels. Stay firm. Lucas." I stared at the message, grateful for the warning but disturbed by my father's persistence. The anniversary dinner was clearly intended as a way to corner me, to use social pressure and the presence of extended family to force a reconciliation on their terms. "Thanks for letting me know, Lucas, and for refusing to get involved. I appreciate your support." His response came quickly. "You're doing what you need to do. Wish I'd been brave enough to stand up to my own family years ago." The next morning, I awoke to Catherine Reyes's formal response letter in my inbox. It was masterfully written, professional, precise, and unmistakably firm. It acknowledged my parents' 40 years of marriage with brief congratulations before transitioning to the matter at hand. My unequivocal rejection of the trust amendment and the requirement that all future communication regarding family assets be directed to Ms. Reyes's office. The letter concluded, "Ms. Bennett values her relationship with her parents and wishes to resolve this matter amicably. However, the attempt to substantially alter her inheritance rights through misleading means has necessitated this formal response. She remains open to fair and transparent discussions about the family trust, conducted through appropriate legal channels." I approved the letter immediately, a sense of vindication washing over me as I imagined my parents receiving it. For once, I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't accommodating. I wasn't putting their feelings above my own legitimate concerns. The rest of the work week passed in a flurry of activity. I threw myself into client projects, attended Nathan's soccer game, helped Zoe make a diorama for science class, and managed to avoid answering most of my parents' increasingly frequent calls. When I did speak with them, I kept the conversations, brief, and redirected any mention of the trust or the anniversary dinner with a simple, "I've stated my position on that. I'm not discussing it further." By Friday, the pressure had intensified. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was breaking her heart. My father sent terse texts about family obligation. Amber alternated between angry messages, calling me selfish and pleading ones, asking me to reconsider for Mom and Dad's sake. Even extended family members began reaching out. Cousins I rarely spoke with, an aunt who lived across the country, my father's brother whom I saw perhaps once every few years. The coordinated effort was impressive in its scope, if not its subtlety. Alone in my kitchen that night, after declining a dozen different appeals, I felt a moment of doubt creep in. Was I being too harsh? Could I attend the dinner, maintain my boundaries about the trust, but still honor my parents' milestone? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through recent messages, reminding myself of what had brought me to this point. The deliberate exclusion at Tahoe, the calculated test of my commitment to family, the attempt to trick me into signing away my inheritance, the refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing, even when confronted directly. No, attending the dinner wouldn't be an act of grace. It would be a surrender. It would signal that their behavior was ultimately acceptable, that I would always fold under enough pressure. And that wasn't the example I wanted to set for my children anymore. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop, deciding to write my parents an email, the first direct communication I'd initiated since discovering the truth about the trust amendment. Mom and Dad, I want to congratulate you on 40 years of marriage. That is indeed a significant achievement worthy of celebration. However, I will not be attending tomorrow's dinner. The reason should be clear to you both. Trust has been broken in a fundamental way, and attending a public family function while pretending everything is fine would be dishonest, to myself and to everyone present. I have received your certified letter and reviewed it thoroughly with my attorney. I hope we can eventually find a path forward that respects all family members equally, but that will require honest acknowledgement of what has occurred and genuine willingness to change the patterns that led us here. For now, please respect my decision to maintain distance while I process the events of the past few weeks. Jordan. I read it over twice, making sure it conveyed exactly what I wanted to say. Firm but not vindictive, clear about my position without unnecessary accusations. Then I sent it before I could second-guess myself. The response was almost immediate, not from my parents, but from Amber. Jordan. You can't seriously be doing this. Do you have any idea how much work I've put into this dinner? The reservations, the decorations, the surprise video from all their friends? Mom is beside herself, and Dad is so angry he can barely speak. All because you're too stubborn to set aside your issues for one night. This isn't about some stupid paperwork anymore. This is about you being selfish and petty and ruining something important. But I guess that's just who you are now. I stared at her message, noting the complete absence of any acknowledgement of the trust amendment, the deliberate deception, or their collective role in creating this situation. In Amber's mind, and likely my parents as well, I was still the problem. My reaction was the issue, not their actions. The realization was both sad and freeing. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to suddenly see my perspective or acknowledge their wrongs. This was who they were, and no amount of wishing or hoping or accommodating on my part would transform them into the loving, fair parents I had always wanted. I closed my laptop without responding to Amber and went to bed, sleeping more soundly than I had in weeks. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. As I made pancakes for the kids, Nathan asked what we were doing that day. I thought we could go hiking at Forest Park, I suggested. The weather's perfect for it. Can we have a picnic? Zoe asked, eyes lighting up. Absolutely. We'll pack a feast. As we were gathering supplies for our adventure, my doorbell rang. I froze, suspecting who it might be even before opening the door. My father stood on the porch, his expression a mixture of anger and discomfort. He wore a dress shirt and tie, clearly having come directly from some pre-anniversary event. Dad, I said, not inviting him in. This is unexpected. It shouldn't be, he replied gruffly. When my daughter refuses to attend her parents' anniversary, celebration, I think a personal visit is warranted. Behind me, I heard Nathan's excited voice. Grandpa! Before he ran to the door. My father's expression softened as he knelt to hug his grandson. Hey, sport. How's my favorite soccer player? I scored 2 goals last game, Nathan announced, proudly. That's my boy. Zoe appeared more cautiously, hanging back slightly. Hi, Grandpa. There's my princess. He opened his arm to include her in the hug, and she approached with a small smile. I watched the interaction with mixed emotions. Despite everything, my father loved his grandchildren, and they loved him. The complexity of family relationships, how they could be simultaneously genuine and manipulative, loving and harmful, had never felt more apparent. Kids, I said gently, Grandpa and I need to talk for a minute. Why don't you go finish packing the picnic bags? Make sure we have enough. Water bottles. Once they had disappeared into the kitchen, I turned back to my father. You shouldn't have come here unannounced. Wouldn't have had to if you'd answer your phone, he countered, stepping past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. Your mother is heartbroken, Jordan. I'm sorry to hear that. My voice was calm but firm. But I meant what I said in my email. I can't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his silver hair. A gesture so familiar it made my chest ache despite my anger. This has all been blown completely out of proportion. Has it? I crossed my arms. You and Mom gave me the wrong date for a family vacation as a test, then tried to trick me into signing away my inheritance. In what universe is that a minor issue? The trust amendment was about equalizing things, he insisted, his voice rising slightly. Your sister has needed more financial support over the years. This was simply a way to formalize what's already happened informally. Then why not present it honestly? Why invent a story about selling the lake house? Why not say, Jordan, we've given Amber substantial financial help over the years, and we'd like to adjust the trust to reflect that. He shifted uncomfortably. We thought you might not understand. No, I corrected him. You thought I wouldn't. Agree. Because it's fundamentally unfair. Amber chose her path in life, just as I chose mine. The fact that my choices led to financial independence while hers required ongoing support from you and Mom doesn't mean I should forfeit my inheritance. My father's face hardened. This is exactly why we approached it the way we did. You've always been so rigid, so judgmental about your sister's choices. That's not true, I protested. I've never once criticized Amber for accepting your help. I've never asked for the same support or complained about the imbalance. All I've done is refuse to be manipulated and lied to. We stood facing each other in my entryway, decades of unspoken tensions hovering between us. My father had always been an imposing figure in my life, the ultimate authority, the one whose approval I had sought most desperately. Now, for the first time, I was seeing him clearly, not as the infallible patriarch, but as a flawed man who had made hurtful choices. The anniversary dinner starts at 7, he said finally, his voice lower but no less insistent. Your mother has saved seats for you and the kids. She's still hoping you'll change your mind. I shook my head. I won't be there, Dad, and neither will Nathan and Zoe. We already have plans for today. His gaze sharpened. Plans more important than your parents' 40th anniversary? Plans I'm not willing to change because of last-minute emotional manipulation, I corrected him. I've made my decision, and I'm standing by it. Jordan? No, Dad. This conversation is over. Please leave. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then, with a look of disgusted disappointment I had seen many times before, he turned toward the door. You're making a mistake you'll regret, he said, his hand on the doorknob. Some things can't be undone. As the door closed behind him, I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. Standing up to my father, sending him away from my home, without giving in to his demands, was perhaps the most difficult thing I had ever done. But as I heard my children's voices from the kitchen, excited about our upcoming adventure, I knew it was also among the most necessary. This wasn't just about the lake house anymore, or even about the patterns of favoritism that had shaped my family. This was about showing my children what healthy boundaries looked like, what self-respect demanded, what courage in the face of manipulation could achieve. "Mom," Nathan called, "we're ready for our picnic." I took a deep breath, pushing aside the echoes of my father's parting words. "Coming, sweetie, let's have an amazing day." And despite everything, despite the pain and conflict and difficult conversations, I found that I meant it. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was choosing my own path, unapologetically prioritizing my peace and my children's well-being over the impossible task of earning my parents' equal regard. The day stretched before us, full of possibility, and I was ready to embrace it, on my terms, not theirs. Monday morning greeted me with an uneasy calm, the kind that settles after a storm, when you're not yet sure if the worst has passed or if you're merely in the eye of the hurricane. I'd made it through the weekend without attending my parents' anniversary dinner, and while I'd braced for an immediate onslaught of recriminations, my phone had remained surprisingly quiet. No calls from my mother, no angry texts from my father, not even Amber's usual barrage of guilt-laden messages. The silence was almost more unnerving than the conflict. "You're distracted this morning," Emily noted as I stared blankly at the campaign mock-up spread across my desk. My assistant knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was elsewhere, even if she didn't know the details of my family drama. "Sorry," I sighed, refocusing on the work before me. "Just some personal things on my mind. Anything I can help with?" I smiled gratefully at her offer. "Not unless you can magically transform dysfunctional family dynamics overnight." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "That particular magic is beyond my skill set, unfortunately." "Mine, too," I murmured, turning back to the mock-ups with renewed determination. Work had always been my refuge, the place where merit mattered, where I could control outcomes through effort and skill, where the rules made sense. Right now, I needed that stability more than ever. I managed to stay focused through back-to-back meetings until lunchtime, when Catherine Reyes's office called to schedule a follow-up consultation. The request felt ominous, suggesting developments I wasn't aware of. "Is everything okay?" I asked the receptionist, trying to keep my voice casual. "Ms. Reyes just wants to discuss some new information that's come to her attention," came the diplomatic response. "She has availability tomorrow at 11 or Wednesday at 3. I chose the earlier option, unable to stomach the idea of waiting an extra day to learn what new complication had arisen. After setting the appointment, I found myself too unsettled to eat lunch, opting instead for a walk around the block to clear my head. The October air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, the Portland skyline partly obscured by low-hanging clouds that threatened rain. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, wondering what my parents were doing now. Had they spent Sunday recovering from their celebration? Were they discussing their next move with Amber? Or had they finally accepted that I wouldn't be manipulated back into the old patterns? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Jordan, it's Aunt Patricia, your mother's sister. I was so sorry you couldn't make it to the anniversary. Dinner, everyone missed you. Would love to catch up. Coffee this week?" I stared at the message with suspicion. Aunt Patricia had never once in my adult life suggested we catch up over coffee. She lived in Seattle and visited Portland perhaps once a year, usually for major family gatherings. We weren't close, and our interactions had always been pleasant, but superficial. This sudden interest felt strategic rather than genuine, another attempt to bring me back into the fold through a less confrontational channel. I typed a polite but firm response. "Hi, Aunt Patricia, thanks for reaching out. I'm swamped with work and kid responsibilities right now, but I appreciate the thought. Hope you enjoyed the celebration. Her reply came almost immediately. I understand, dear, but family is so important, especially during difficult times. I'm in town until Thursday and would make myself available whenever works for you. Even just a quick coffee? The persistence confirmed my suspicion. My parents had recruited her, likely painting me as the unreasonable daughter who needed gentle persuasion to rejoin the family. I'm afraid it won't be possible this visit. Maybe next time you're in Portland. I put my phone away without waiting for her response and headed back to the office. The brief piece of my walk shattered by this reminder that the situation with my family was far from resolved. By late afternoon, I'd received similar outreach from 2 cousins and my father's close friend from college. All people I rarely communicated with, all suddenly concerned about my well-being and eager to meet in person. I declined each invitation, with increasing brevity, my patience wearing thin with the coordinated campaign. When my phone rang again just before 5, I almost didn't answer. But the caller ID showed Taylor's name, and I desperately needed to hear a friendly voice. Please, tell me you're calling to suggest wine and takeout tonight, I answered, only half joking. Better, she replied. I'm calling to warn you that your sister just pulled into your driveway. I happened to be driving by on my way home from the grocery store and recognized her car. My stomach dropped. Amber's at my house? Now? Looks that way. And she's not alone. There's someone else in the passenger seat. Older woman. Couldn't see clearly who. My mother, I said with certainty. The ambush approach was exactly her style when other tactics failed. Thank you for the heads up. I owe you one. You owe me nothing. Just stay strong. Call me after if you need to vent. I ended the call and immediately phoned Taylor's 16-year-old daughter, my regular backup babysitter. Lily, I hate to ask on such short notice, but is there any chance you could pick Nathan and Zoe up from after-school care and stay with them for a couple of hours? Something's come up. Fortunately, Lily was available and happy to help. I quickly called the school to authorize the change in pickup, then texted Taylor to let her know Lily would be taking the kids to my house. The last thing I wanted was for my children to be present for whatever confrontation my mother and sister had planned. With that arranged, I took a moment to gather myself. If they wanted to surprise me at home, they'd find an empty house. But if they planned to confront me at work, I'd be prepared. I cleared my desk, closed unnecessary browser tabs, and opened my email to Catherine Reyes, typing a quick update about the escalating contact attempts. 5 o'clock came and went without any surprise visitors appearing at my office. By 5:30, I began to wonder if Taylor had been mistaken, or if Amber and my mother had changed their minds. At 5:45, just as I was preparing to leave, Emily knocked on my door. Jordan, your sister and mother are here to see you. They don't have an appointment, but they're insisting it's important. I took a deep breath. Thank you, Emily. Could you please show them in? Are you sure? I can tell them you've already left if you prefer. I appreciated her protectiveness but shook my head. It's fine. Better to handle this here than have them show up at my house. Emily nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with Amber and my mother in tow. They looked exactly as I had expected, my mother poised and elegant even in her distress, Amber tense and combative, both of them ready for battle. Jordan, my mother began, moving toward me with arms outstretched as if for a hug. I remained, seated behind my desk. Mom, Amber, this is unexpected. My mother's arms dropped awkwardly to her sides. We wouldn't have had to surprise you if you'd answer your phone. I've been busy, I said simply, and I made my position clear in my email. I need space right now. Amber made a sound of disgust. Space. Right. That's why you've hired a lawyer and are telling everyone in the family that Mom and Dad tried to steal your inheritance. I looked at her steadily. I haven't told anyone anything of the sort. But yes, I did consult an attorney after discovering the trust amendment wasn't what Mom represented it to be. It was a simple misunderstanding, my mother insisted, settling uninvited into one of the chairs opposite my desk. Amber followed suit, crossing her arms defensively. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I countered. You told me you wanted to sell the lake house when the document was actually about transferring my share to Amber. That's not a miscommunication. It's deliberate deception. My mother sighed dramatically. I may have oversimplified when I first mentioned it, but I didn't intend to mislead you. I just thought it would be easier to discuss the details in person. The details being that you wanted me to sign away my inheritance without realizing what I was doing? You're being so melodramatic, Amber cut in. It's not like you care about the lake house anyway. When was the last time you even went there? I take my kids every summer. Whether I visit frequently or not isn't the point. It's part of my inheritance and my children's legacy. And more importantly, the way this was handled shows a fundamental lack of respect for me. My mother leaned forward, her expression softening into the sympathetic look she used when she thought I was being unreasonable but wanted to appear understanding. Sweetheart, we respect you enormously. We're so proud of how independent you've always been, how you've made your own way without needing our help. Unlike some people, I couldn't help adding, with a pointed glance at Amber. See? Amber flared. This is exactly your problem. You think you're better than me because you've never asked for help, because you've always been so perfect and self-sufficient. Well, guess what? Life isn't a competition, Jordan. You're right, I agreed, surprising her. It isn't a competition, which is why I've never complained about the financial support you've received over the years. I've never begrudged you that help or thought less of you for needing it. My mother seized on this opening. Exactly. You've always understood that families support each other in different ways. Your father and I have helped Amber financially, because that's what she needed. You've never needed that kind of help. And now you want to formalize that imbalance by giving her my share of the lake house. Not giving, my mother corrected quickly, adjusting the distribution to reflect the support she's already received. Then why not be honest about that from the beginning? Why invent a story about selling the property? My mother glanced away, the first crack in her composed facade. We weren't sure how you'd react. Because you knew it was wrong, I said softly. You knew it wouldn't seem fair to me, so instead of having an honest conversation, you tried to trick me into signing away my rights. No one was trying to trick you, Amber insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Then explain why Mom showed up unannounced at my house, claimed you had buyers lined up for the lake house, and pressured me to sign documents immediately, documents that had nothing to do with selling the property. Neither of them had a ready answer for that. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd observed throughout my childhood whenever she was caught in a lie. Look, I continued, filling the uncomfortable silence. I understand why you're here. The anniversary dinner is over. I didn't attend despite the pressure. And now you're worried about what happens next. About how this affects the family image. About what people will say if the rift becomes public knowledge. That's not, my mother began, but I held up a hand. Please let me finish. This isn't about the lake house anymore. Not really. It's about a pattern that's existed our entire lives, where Amber is prioritized, where my feelings and rights are secondary, where I'm expected to understand and accommodate while she's entitled to demand and receive. That's absurd, my mother protested. We've always loved you both equally. I looked at her sadly. No, Mom, you haven't. And what hurts most isn't even the favoritism, it's the denial. It's being told that what I've experienced my entire life isn't real, that I'm imagining it or exaggerating it. Jordan, Amber started, but I continued. The Tahoe incident made it impossible to ignore anymore. You deliberately excluded me, tested me, then attacked me when I had a normal emotional reaction to being manipulated. And now, the trust amendment has shown just how far you're willing to go to maintain the imbalance. My mother's expression hardened. So that's it? You're cutting us off over one mishandled vacation and some paperwork you never even signed? I'm not cutting anyone off, I clarified. I'm establishing boundaries. I'm refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics that have hurt me for decades. I'm prioritizing my well-being and my children's well-being over maintaining a facade of family harmony. And what about our well-being? Amber demanded. Have you thought about what this is doing to Mom and Dad? Dad's blood pressure is not my responsibility, I finished firmly. I'm sorry if he's struggling with this situation, but I didn't create it. All of this could have been avoided with honesty and genuine respect for me as an equal member of this family. My mother stood abruptly, gathering her purse with trembling hands. I can see this conversation isn't going anywhere productive. You've clearly made up your mind to paint yourself as the victim here. I remained calm. I'm not a victim, Mom. Not anymore. That's the whole point. Amber rose as well, her face flushed with anger. So what now? What? Stop being part of the family because you're mad about the lake house? I'm taking space to figure out what kind of relationship is actually healthy for me going forward. I've asked that communications about the trust go through my attorney, and I'd appreciate if both of you would respect my request for distance while I process everything. Your father will be devastated, my mother said, her final attempt at leveraging guilt. After everything he's done for you. I met her gaze steadily. I love Dad. I love both of you, but love shouldn't require me to accept manipulation and dishonesty. They left without another word, the silence in their wake both heavy and oddly liberating. I sat motionless for several minutes, absorbing what had just happened. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had directly confronted the family dynamic without backing down, without accepting the gaslighting, without taking responsibility for feelings that weren't mine to manage. It felt terrifying, and necessary, and right. I gathered my things and headed home, where Lily had dinner almost ready and the kids were happily working on homework at the kitchen table. The normalcy of the scene, the mundane, beautiful reality of our little family, grounded me after the emotional confrontation with my mother and sister. Everything okay? Lily asked quietly as I paid her for the evening's help. Getting there, I replied with a smile that felt more genuine than I'd expected. Thanks for helping out on such short notice. After she left, I sat with Nathan and Zoe over chicken pasta, listening to their chatter about school and friends, marveling at how resilient and joyful they remained despite the recent upheaval. Children were remarkably adaptable, I reflected, though I was determined that my kids wouldn't have to adapt to the same patterns of favoritism and conditional love that had marked my own childhood. Later, after bedtime stories and tucking them in, I poured a glass of wine and called Taylor, filling her in on the confrontation at my office. So basically, they showed up to justify their actions without actually admitting they did anything wrong, she summarized. Pretty much, I agreed, sinking deeper into my couch. Classic non-apology. We respect you enormously, which is why we tried to trick you out of your inheritance. Taylor snorted. The mental gymnastics are impressive. The thing is, I said, staring into my wine glass, I almost believe they don't see anything wrong with what they did. In their minds, the favoritism toward Amber is just natural, the way things should be. They genuinely can't understand why I'm upset. Because acknowledging it would mean confronting their own behavior, Taylor pointed out. It's easier to make you the problem than to admit they've treated you unfairly for years. Exactly. I took a sip of wine, thinking about my conversation with Catherine Reyes scheduled for the following morning. I'm worried about what new issue has come up with the trust. My mother seemed very concerned about appearances, about people finding out there's a rift in the family. Control, Taylor said simply. This is all about control. As long as you played your assigned role, the understanding daughter who accepts less, everything worked in their system. Now you're disrupting that, and they don't know how to respond except by trying to force you back into line. Her insight resonated deeply. You're right. It's not even about love, really. It's about maintaining the hierarchy they've established, where Amber's needs always come first and I'm expected to accommodate without complaint. So, what are you going to do now? I considered the question carefully. Hold my ground. Wait to see what Catherine has to say tomorrow. Focus on my kids. And my work and the relationships that actually nourish me instead of depleting me. Sounds like a plan, Taylor approved. And Jordan, I'm really proud of you. Standing up to family is one of the hardest things to do. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking about the journey of the past few weeks. From the shock at Tahoe to the discovery of the trust deception to today's confrontation, each step had been painful but clarifying, forcing me to see patterns I had long tried to ignore. I hadn't chosen this conflict. I would have preferred a family dynamic based on mutual respect and equal regard. But since that wasn't possible, I was choosing how to respond. With dignity, with boundaries, with a determination to break cycles rather than perpetuate them. The next morning, I dressed carefully for my meeting with Catherine Reyes, selecting a tailored blazer and slim-fit trousers that made me feel polished and confident. Whatever new development had arisen, I wanted to face it from a position of strength. Her office was, as I remembered, orderly, professional, with the comforting weight of legal tomes lining bookshelves and framed credentials on the walls. Catherine greeted me with a warm handshake and ushered me to the same comfortable chair I'd occupied during our first meeting. Thank you for coming in on short notice, she began, settling behind her desk. Some developments over the weekend warranted an in-person discussion rather than email. That sounds ominous, I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. Not necessarily ominous, but certainly significant. She opened a folder on her desk. I received a call from your parents' attorney yesterday. Not Mr. Winters, but a new lawyer named Gregory Parsons. They've hired new representation? This was unexpected. My parents had worked with Mr. Winters for decades. It appears so. Mr. Parsons informed me that your parents are prepared to withdraw the trust amendment that concerned you, essentially returning to the original terms where you and your sister are equal beneficiaries of all family assets, including the lake house. Relief washed over me. That's good news, right? It would be, Catherine agreed, except there's a condition attached to their offer. Of course there was. What kind of condition? They're requesting that you sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all family financial matters, specifically prohibiting you from discussing the trust, your parents' financial support of your sister, or any perceived disparities in how family resources have been allocated. I stared at her, processing this new twist. They want to legally prevent me from talking about the favoritism? Essentially, yes. The proposed NDA is quite comprehensive. It would prohibit you from discussing these matters with anyone outside. The immediate family, including friends, other relatives, social media contacts, and even your own children once they reach adulthood. That's... I struggled to find the right word. Absurd and telling. Catherine nodded. It suggests their primary concern is reputation management rather than addressing the underlying issues you've raised. My mother was very concerned yesterday about appearances, about what people would say if they knew about the family rift. That aligns with this approach, Catherine confirmed. Mr. Parsons emphasized that your parents are prominent in certain social and business circles, and that family disputes becoming public could potentially harm their standing. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. So they're willing to give me back what was already legally mine, as long as I promise never to tell anyone how they tried to take it away in the first place? That's an accurate summary, yes. I thought for a moment, considering the implications. What happens if I refuse to sign their NDA? According to Mr. Parsons, they would proceed with challenging certain aspects of the family trust through legal channels, potentially leading to protracted litigation, even though the original trust is legally sound? Even so, litigation isn't always about who's legally right. Sometimes it's about who has the resources to sustain a lengthy court battle. The threat was clear. Sign our agreement or face a costly legal fight. It was manipulation in a new form, but the same fundamental dynamic. Pressure applied until I complied with their wishes. What would you advise? I asked, trusting Catherine's professional judgment. She considered carefully before responding. From a strictly legal perspective, their withdrawal of the amendment returns you to the position you should have been in all along. The NDA is problematic in its breadth, but not entirely unusual in family financial settlements. She paused, then continued more personally. However, from what you've shared about your family dynamics, this request seems to be another attempt to control your narrative and silence legitimate concerns. You would need to consider whether signing such an agreement would contribute to the same unhealthy patterns you're trying to break. I nodded, appreciating her balanced perspective. If I were to consider signing something, could we negotiate the terms? Make the NDA more limited in scope? Absolutely. We could propose a narrower agreement that protects specific financial details without preventing you from discussing your general family experience. And what about the legal threats? How seriously should I take those? Catherine's expression turned thoughtful. Your parents would face significant hurdles in challenging a properly established family trust, especially given that Mr. Winters, who created the original document, would likely testify to its validity. However, legal proceedings can be expensive and emotionally draining regardless of outcome. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I need some time to think about this. Of course, she agreed. I told Mr. Parsons I would discuss his proposal with you and respond by the end of the week. There's no need to make a hasty decision. As I left her office, my mind was spinning with the implications of this new development. On one hand, my parents were retreating from their attempt to disinherit me, a victory of sorts. On the other hand, their proposed NDA revealed that their primary concern was protecting their reputation, not repairing our relationship or acknowledging the harm they had caused. Rather than returning to work, I found myself driving to the waterfront park where I often took the kids on weekends. I needed space to think, to process this latest maneuver without the distractions of emails and meetings. The park was relatively quiet on a Tuesday morning. Just a few joggers, some parents with toddlers, an elderly couple feeding ducks by the water's edge. I found an empty bench overlooking the river and sat, watching the water flow past, constant and unhurried. What did I really want from this situation? Not to punish my parents or Amber, despite the hurt they had caused. Not financial gain beyond what was fairly mine. Not even public vindication, though the NDA request suggested that's what they feared most. What I wanted, I realized, was acknowledgement. Recognition that the favoritism had been real, that the manipulation had been deliberate, that my feelings and boundaries deserved respect. I wanted change, not just in specific decisions about trusts and property, but in the fundamental dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. The NDA would accomplish the opposite. It would formalize the expectation that I remain silent about my experiences, that I protect the family image at the expense of my truth. It would be another victory for appearance over authenticity. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Jordan, this is Lucas Mitchell again." I've heard about recent developments with your parents and the NDA proposal. If you'd like to discuss, I'm still in Portland for one more day. No pressure either way. I hadn't expected to hear from Lucas again, especially not about this latest turn of events. How had he learned about the NDA? Had my father confided in him, or was Portland's business community simply that interconnected? Thank you, Lucas. I would appreciate your perspective. Same cafe as before? 4 p.m.? His response came quickly. I'll be there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of client calls and meetings, my mind only partially present as I went through the motions of my work responsibilities. By 4 o'clock, I was sliding into a chair across from Lucas at Riverside Bakery, grateful for his steady presence amid the chaos of my family situation. Thank you for meeting me, I said as he pushed a coffee toward me. Prepared exactly as I liked it, I noticed with surprise. I remembered from last time, he explained, noticing my expression. Black with 1 sugar. Good memory, I acknowledged, warming my hands around the mug. Lucas studied me for a moment. You look tired, Jordan. This situation is taking a toll. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. He took a sip of his own coffee. So, an NDA. That's your parents' solution to all this? I nodded. You seem well informed. Did my father tell you? No, surprisingly. I heard through a colleague who knows Gregory Parsons. Portland's legal community isn't as large as it seems. He leaned forward slightly. What are you thinking? About their proposal? I'm conflicted, I admitted. On one level, they're backing down from trying to disinherit me, which should feel like a win. But the NDA feels like another form of control. Like they're buying my silence rather than addressing the real issues. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. That tracks with what I know of your father. Richard has always been more concerned with how things appear than how they actually are. You've known him a long time, I observed. Were you aware of how differently he treated Amber and me? Lucas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I saw patterns, instances where the rules seemed to bend for Amber but remain rigid for you. Occasions where your achievements were acknowledged briefly while hers were celebrated extravagantly. The confirmation from someone outside the family, someone who had observed the dynamic objectively, felt surprisingly validating. Why do you think he does it? My father, I mean. Lucas considered this, his expression thoughtful. I've always believed it has more to do with Richard than with either you or Amber. Your sister reminds him of himself, charismatic, somewhat impulsive, comfortable asking for help. You remind him of who he thinks he should be, self-sufficient, responsible, strong. So he resents me for embodying virtues he aspires to, but struggles with himself? Perhaps not conscious resentment, Lucas clarified, but a kind of discomfort. Your independence highlights his own areas of insecurity, while Amber's dependence allows him to feel powerful and needed. His insight resonated deeply, offering a perspective I had never considered. My father's favoritism wasn't necessarily about loving Amber more. It was about his own complex relationship with dependency and self-sufficiency. That actually makes sense, I said slowly, but it doesn't make it any less harmful. No, Lucas agreed. Understanding the roots of harmful behavior doesn't excuse it, and it doesn't obligate you to continue accepting it. So about this NDA? I can't tell you what to do, he said carefully. But I will say this. In my experience, attempts to legislate silence rarely lead to genuine healing. They address symptoms, not causes. I nodded, feeling clarity begin to emerge from the confusion of recent days. That's what bothers me most about it. They're not saying, we recognize we hurt you and want to make amends. And they're saying, we'll give you what's already legally yours if you promise never to tell anyone what we tried to do. And if that's their position, What does it suggest about the likelihood of real change in how they relate to you? Not much, I acknowledged grimly. Lucas reached across the table, briefly squeezing my hand in a paternal gesture that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Jordan, I've watched you grow from a serious little girl always trying to earn approval into a remarkable woman and mother. Whatever you decide about this NDA, don't lose sight of how far you've come in recognizing your own worth. His words stayed with me as I drove home, echoing in my mind as I prepared dinner for the kids, supervised homework, and went through our evening routine. By the time Nathan and Zoe were tucked into bed, I had reached a decision about how to respond to my parents' offer. I sat at my kitchen table and composed an email to Catherine Reyes. Dear Catherine, after careful consideration, I cannot accept the NDA as proposed. The requirement that I remain silent about my family experiences feels like an extension of the same unhealthy dynamics I'm trying to address. However, I am open to a more limited agreement that protects specific financial details of the trust without restricting my ability to discuss my lived experience. If my parents are genuinely concerned about business interests or specific dollar amounts becoming public, I can accommodate that without surrendering my voice entirely. My hope is that this counter-proposal will reveal whether their primary concern is legitimate privacy around financial matters or simply preventing me from speaking my truth about family patterns that deserve to be examined in the light. Please let me know your thoughts and how best to proceed. Sincerely, Jordan Bennett. After sending the email, I felt a curious lightness. The weight of indecision lifted from my shoulders. Whether my parents accepted my counter-proposal or not, I had maintained my integrity and my boundaries. I had refused to be silenced as the price of receiving what was rightfully mine. The next test would be how they responded, whether they were willing to compromise or would insist on complete control of the narrative. Either way, I was prepared to stand my ground to protect what mattered most, not just material inheritance, but the legacy of truth and authenticity I wanted to pass on to my children. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone pinged with a final text for the day, from Lucas. Whatever you decide about the NDA, remember this. Some inheritances are worth more than property or money. The courage to break unhealthy cycles might be the most valuable legacy you leave your children. I smiled at the synchronicity with my own thoughts. Perhaps that was the real test in all of this. Not my parents testing my commitment to family, but life testing my commitment to truth, to self-respect, to creating something better for the next generation. If so, it was a test I intended to pass. 3 days passed without a response to my counter-proposal. Catherine assured me this wasn't unusual. Attorneys often took time to consult with clients, especially when new terms were introduced. But I couldn't help checking my email obsessively, wondering what was happening behind the scenes. Were my parents genuinely considering my terms, or merely strategizing their next move in what had become an unexpected chess match? On the 4th day, while reviewing creative briefs in my office, Catherine called with news. I've heard back from Mr. Parsons, she began, her tone carefully neutral. Your parents have rejected the modified NDA proposal. Despite having prepared myself for this possibility, the words still stung. I see. What's their position now? They're standing firm on their original terms. Full confidentiality in exchange for withdrawing the trust amendment. Mr. Parsons indicated that this is their final offer, and that they're prepared to pursue legal channels if we don't accept. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this information. So they'd rather spend money on legal battles than accept that I have the right to speak about my own experiences? It appears that way, Catherine confirmed. From a strategic perspective, their position doesn't make much financial sense. Litigation would be expensive for all parties, with uncertain outcomes. This suggests the issue is deeply personal rather than practical. It's about control, I said softly, remembering Taylor's insight. It always has been. That's my assessment as well. Catherine paused. How would you like to proceed, Jordan? It was the question I'd been asking myself for days, turning over various scenarios in my mind during quiet moments between work and parenting responsibilities. What was I willing to fight for, and at what cost? What example did I want to set for Nathan and Zoe? I won't sign their NDA, I said, my voice growing stronger with certainty. Not in its current form. If they want to pursue litigation, I'm prepared to defend myself legally, but I'd prefer one more attempt at reaching them directly, parent to child, not lawyer to lawyer. Catherine's voice held a note of caution. Direct communication can be risky at this stage. Anything you say could potentially be used in future legal proceedings. I understand. But before we escalate to full legal warfare, I want to try speaking to them as their daughter one more time. Not about the legal details, but about what this conflict is really about. After discussing parameters and precautions, Catherine reluctantly agreed to my approach, with the understanding that I would say nothing that could compromise my legal position. We arranged to speak again after my attempt at direct communication. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I drafted the most difficult email I'd ever written. Mom and Dad. Before our attorneys take us further down a path that will permanently alter our family, I'm writing to you directly, not about legal documents or inheritance, but about what this conflict truly represents. The lake house has become a symbol, but it was never the real issue. The real issue is a lifetime of feeling less valued, less respected, less heard. It's about discovering that you were willing to deceive me to take away what was rightfully mine. It's about your consistent refusal to acknowledge these patterns, even when confronted with them directly. I'm not asking for special treatment or additional financial support. I'm asking for honesty, for recognition, for the dignity of having my experiences validated rather than dismissed. Your NDA proposal tells me that your primary concern is maintaining appearances, ensuring no one outside our family learns about the dynamics within it. But silence doesn't heal wounds, it allows them to fester. I cannot sign an agreement that requires me to pretend my experiences never happened. I cannot teach my children that the price of family belonging is surrendering their voice and their truth. If you truly want resolution, it begins with acknowledgement, not legal maneuvers designed to silence me. I remain open to healing our relationship, but it must be built on honesty and mutual respect, not control and denial. With love despite everything. Jordan. I read it over twice, made a few small edits, then sent it before I could second-guess myself. Whatever happened next, I had spoken my truth plainly and with integrity. The response came faster than I expected. The next morning, an email from my father appeared in my inbox. Jordan. Your mother and I have received your message. While we fundamentally disagree with your characterization of family dynamics and recent events, we recognize that continued legal conflict is in no one's best interest. We are therefore withdrawing both the trust amendment and the NDA requirement. The original trust terms will remain in effect, with you and Amber as equal beneficiaries of all family assets. This decision is final and not open to further negotiation. We ask only that you exercise discretion in any public discussions of family matters, not as a legal obligation but as a courtesy. Additionally, we believe a period of limited contact would benefit all parties. This situation has been stressful for everyone, particularly your mother, whose health has suffered as a result. Richard Bennett. I stared at the screen reading and rereading the terse message. It wasn't the heartfelt reconciliation I might have once hoped for. There was no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no real recognition of my concerns. But there was also no more deception, no more legal threats, No more attempts to control my voice through contractual obligations. It was, I realized, probably the best outcome I could realistically expect from parents who had spent decades establishing and reinforcing their particular family dynamic. They weren't going to suddenly transform into the emotionally aware, equitable parents I had always wanted. But they were backing down from their attempt to disinherit me, and that was something. I forwarded the email to Catherine, who responded within the hour. Jordan. This is a significant development and generally positive from a legal perspective. Your father has essentially conceded to your central demand, maintaining your rightful place in the family trust without restrictions on your speech. The request for discretion has no legal weight, nor does the suggestion of limited contact. These are personal boundaries they're attempting to establish rather than legal conditions. I would recommend formally acknowledging receipt of this message and confirming your understanding that the original trust remains in effect with no amendments. Beyond that, decisions about family contact and communication are entirely yours to make based on what feels healthiest for you and your children. Congratulations on standing your ground effectively. Many clients in similar situations lack the courage to maintain boundaries with family members, especially when faced with potential litigation. Catherine Reyes, Esquire. I sent a brief, formal acknowledgement to my father as Catherine suggested, then sat back in my chair, processing the resolution of the legal aspect of our conflict. The lake house and my children's inheritance were secure. The attempt to silence me had failed. On paper, I had won. Yet the victory felt hollow in many ways. What I had really wanted wasn't property or legal rights, but recognition, connection. The acknowledgement that my experiences and feelings mattered just as much as Amber's. Those things remained elusive, perhaps permanently so. Over the next few weeks, as Catherine had predicted, my parents maintained their limited contact boundary. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. Amber, too, remained silent, though I occasionally saw her social media posts, carefully curated images of her children at various activities, often with my parents proudly featured in the background. At first, I waited for the familiar ache of exclusion to surface, the pain of seeing visual evidence of continued favoritism. But something had shifted inside me. I could observe these dynamics without being wounded by them, could recognize the patterns without feeling diminished by them. "You seem different," Taylor observed one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my back deck, watching our children play an elaborate game of their own invention in the yard. More. I don't know. Settled. I considered her observation. I think I am. Not because anything fundamental has changed with my family. It hasn't. But because I've finally accepted that reality instead of fighting against it or trying to earn something they're not capable of giving. That's huge, she said quietly. Most people spend their whole lives in that struggle. I almost did, I admitted, thinking of all the years I'd tried to prove myself worthy of equal love, equal regard, equal respect. But something about the lake house deception, it was just so blatant, so undeniable. It forced me to see what I'd been avoiding for decades. The evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn, crisp and cleansing. I watched Nathan help Zoe climb higher in the maple tree, his small hands steady and supportive as he guided her to a secure branch. My heart swelled with love for them both, my son with his natural protectiveness, my daughter with her fearless determination. "I've been thinking about breaking cycles," I said, still watching the children, "about how patterns repeat through generations unless someone consciously interrupts them." Taylor nodded. "Is that what this has been about for you? Breaking the cycle?" "Partly. I don't want Nathan and Zoe to grow up thinking they need to earn love, or that their worth depends on someone else's validation. I want them to know they're inherently valuable, just as they are." "Pretty sure they already know that," Taylor said with a smile. nodding toward the children who were now racing each other across the yard, faces alight with joy and freedom. "You've done good, Mama." A month after my father's email, an unexpected letter arrived, not from my parents, but from Lucas Mitchell. Inside was a handwritten note on heavyweight stationery. "Jordan, I've been thinking about you and wanted to share something I've observed in my 7 decades on this earth." "Yes," I agreed. "You did. I want you to know," he began, then stopped, gathering himself. "Your mother and I have been discussing things since my episode. We've made some decisions." I tensed slightly, wary of what might follow. "We've established a separate educational trust for each of our grandchildren. Equal amounts for each child, dispersed at the same ages, with identical terms." He met my eyes directly. "Nathan and Zoe will have the same opportunities as Amber's children. That's a promise." The gesture touched me deeply, not because of the financial provision itself, but because it represented something my father had never previously offered. Tangible recognition that my children deserved equal treatment, equal consideration, equal love. "Thank you," I managed, my throat tight with unexpected emotion. "The kids will appreciate that someday." "And you?" he asked, a vulnerability in his voice I had rarely heard. "What would you appreciate, Jordan?" The question caught me off guard. My father had never before asked directly what I wanted or needed from him. I considered my answer carefully. "Honesty," I said finally. "Recognition when things aren't fair or right. The space to speak my truth without being dismissed or attacked for it. Those things would mean more than any financial provision." He nodded slowly, seeming to absorb my words. "I can't promise I'll always get it right. Old habits." He gestured vaguely. "But I can promise to try. And to listen when you tell me I'm failing." It wasn't everything. It wasn't the complete transformation I might have once dreamed of. But it was a beginning, a genuine opening toward something healthier than what had come before. As I left the hospital that evening, having spoken briefly with my mother and Amber as well, I felt a curious lightness. Not because all was forgiven or forgotten, not because all wounds were healed, but because I had maintained my boundaries while still remaining open to whatever authentic connection might be possible. Driving home through the darkening streets of Portland, I thought about tests, the deliberate one my parents had set at Tahoe, and the unintentional one their subsequent actions had created. But most of all, I thought about the test I had set for myself, to break generational patterns, to value truth over comfort, to model self-respect for my children even when it meant standing alone. That was the test that mattered. And whatever happened next with my family, whether slow healing or continued distance, I had passed it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Families are remarkably resistant to change, but individuals can transform completely when they have the courage to see clearly and choose differently. You've demonstrated that courage, and I believe your children will inherit its fruits, not just in material legacy, but in the example you've set by valuing truth over comfortable illusions. Your parents may never fully understand or acknowledge what transpired between you. Some people lack the capacity for that kind of self-reflection. But you have broken an important cycle, and that achievement stands regardless of their recognition. If you ever need a friendly ear or perspective from someone who's witnessed more family dynamics than he cares to admit, my door remains open. With respect and admiration. Lucas. I kept his letter in my desk drawer, returning to it occasionally when doubt crept in or when another family holiday passed without contact from my parents. His words reminded me that transformation wasn't dependent on others' acknowledgement. It existed in the choices I made each day, the boundaries I maintained, the honest relationships I cultivated. 6 months after the trust dispute was resolved, I received a text message that disrupted the uneasy equilibrium that had settled between me and my family. Jordan, it's Amber. Dad had a minor heart attack last night. He's stable now, but I thought, you should know. Portland General, room 412. The news hit me harder than I had expected. Despite everything, he was still my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and helped with science projects and beamed with pride at my college. Graduation? Our relationship was complex, damaged, but not erased. After arranging emergency childcare with Taylor, I drove to the hospital, emotions churning. What would I say to my mother after months of silence? To Amber? To my father, whose mortality suddenly seemed so tangible? I found them in the cardiac unit waiting area, my mother looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered, Amber tense and exhausted. They both looked up as I approached, surprise evident in their expressions. "Jordan," my mother said, rising unsteadily. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied simply. "He's my father." An awkward silence followed, heavy with all the words unspoken between us, all the conflict unresolved. But beneath the awkwardness lay something unexpected. A subtle shift. In the atmosphere, a fractional softening. "How is he?" I asked, directing the question to both of them. "Stable," Amber answered. "It was a mild attack. They caught it early, placed a stent. The doctor is optimistic about recovery." My mother nodded, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "They're letting one person visit at a time. I just came out. You can go in if you'd like." The offer surprised me, an unexpected courtesy I hadn't anticipated. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to—" "He's your father, Jordan," she interrupted, her voice softer than I had heard it in years. "Of course you should see him." I found him propped up slightly in the hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily beside him, his complexion paler than normal but his eyes alert. He turned as I entered, genuine surprise registering on his face. "Jordan, you're here." "Hi, Dad." I approached the bed cautiously, unsure of my welcome. "How are you feeling?" Like an elephant sat on my chest, he attempted a weak smile. "But better than last night." I nodded, settling into the chair beside his bed. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our estrangement filling the space between us. "I didn't expect you to come," he finally said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "After everything." "You're still my father," I replied simply. "That hasn't changed, even if other things have." He looked away, watching the heart monitors. Steady rhythm. "The doctor says I need to reduce stress, make lifestyle changes." He paused. "Resolve unfinished business." I waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "Jordan, I'm not good at—" He gestured vaguely with his hand not connected to an IV. "I've always believed actions speak louder than words. Providing financially, creating opportunities, establishing security. That was how I showed care." "I know, Dad. But perhaps," he continued slowly, as if each word required careful consideration, "I haven't always been equitable in how I distributed that care, or attentive to how it might appear to you." It wasn't exactly an apology or an admission of favoritism, but coming from my father, a man who had never acknowledged fault in my memory, it represented a seismic shift, a tiny crack in the wall of denial that had defined our relationship. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it, even partially." He nodded, fatigue evident in his expression. "The lake house," he said after a moment. "We handled that poorly, very poorly.